He is Jeremy Corbyn, and actually I began by sort of making the point that Liz has been making, that the public finances are in such a dire state that surely Keir Starmer, many would say, is right to refuse to increase the two-child limit on universal credit. I wonder what he said.
Jam Man emotes in chat. Let's see those Jam Man emotes fly. I'm demanding Jam Man emotes. Let's fucking go.
He's wrong. The two-child limit is cruel, impoverishes families of 3 or more children. To abolish it would cost about £1 billion a year.
1.4, I think the IMF said.
1.4. Yeah. Not very much when you look at all the other issues in public spending, but the massive improvement it would make in the lives of those families, in the lives of those children, and I see it as an investment for the future and a big step towards ending child poverty. I just think it's a big mistake to rule it out.
I mean,
The king does not miss. He never misses. The king never misses. We stand, right? Absolutely. And he's right. He's 100% correct, right? There's no reason for it. It's shameful. It's absolutely shameful to continue to promise and rule out ending the two-child cap on benefit, on welfare. Let's call it what it is, right? It's welfare. It's not benefits. There's no benefit to being forced to live off the state on what meagre payments the state doles out. Because you've got to remember, right? Our country does not have a strong welfare state. We do not have a lucrative industry of people living off of welfare. We don't have that at all. You look at Denmark, you look at the Nordic countries, they have much better, much more all-encompassing welfare systems than we do. And they have much higher labour force participation rates. They don't have people, deliberately living off of welfare in the way that we get told every day that happens in this country, despite very little evidence to the contrary. So there is just no correlation between this idea of increasing welfare payments to stop people working, as we've seen from the information that I've just showed on stream, that there was no increasing of employment because of the changes in how we do welfare in this country under the Oswald administration. The two-child benefit cap did not get families back into work. It just didn't. We have the studies to show it. It's as simple as that. All it did is put people into poverty for no reason whatsoever.
His view is winning an election is more important than anything else, and in order to be confident of that, he has got to show that, quotes, he's a safe pair of hands with the economy. Is that a misjudgment?
It's a very strange supposition that you can't win an election because you promise to try and do something to end child poverty. Poor people have votes as well, Those families have got votes as well. Their relatives have got votes as well. And if they are struggling, and I know plenty of families in my own community who 3 or 4, 5 children in some cases, are really struggling.
Have you considered, Jeremy, that Keir Starmer doesn't want to get the votes of poor people? He actually, quite frankly, as we've seen from every single policy prescription that he's held so far, he doesn't care about poor people. He doesn't give a shit about poor people, right? They don't live in swing constituencies in the red wall. They're too busy living in urban constituencies that vote Labour already. Who cares about them? Who cares? Keir doesn't care. There's people who donate to Keir. They don't care. Lord Sainsbury doesn't care. The CEO of Autoglass doesn't care. I know you care. I care a lot, Jeremy. I care a lot about children being out of poverty. But unfortunately, these people don't matter. That's the truth, unfortunately. And the polls show it. Most people support keeping the two-child cap on benefits, even though it makes no sense. All it does is push people into poverty. It's positive economically. It's positive for growth. It's positive for having a strong economy. It gets people out of poverty. It's the morally correct thing to do. It doesn't push people into employment. We have the studies to prove it. There's no reason to do it, and people still support it. Because we're a cruel society, with a consent manufactured by cruel politicians and cruel media people who wanted to create a cruel society. And that's unfortunately the God's honest truth, and it's why Jeremy lost 2 elections.
Struggling, and they would look askance at a Labour proposal which says, well, sorry, your problem, your fault. It was brought in by Ian Duncan Smith in a sort of a fit of public moralism, in which he said it was basically the fault of the poor for having too many children. Well, I thought we'd got past Victorian era thinking in this country.
I mean, Starmer's...
well, evidently you're wrong, Jeremy. Evidently you're incorrect. Yeah, I miss him too, right? It's so refreshing just to have a politician who's not just an incredibly gigantic pile of human feces like every other politician in this country is. It's so sad. It's really sad that there's just so few decent politicians left, and Jeremy is, of course, one of them. But we still have the Victorian era of politics. It's really sad. Far too much of an optimist for UK politics. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Those are measures that radiated people in 2017. Could have rid of that message, but unfortunately, got kiboshed by the Brexit fucking mess, didn't he? That is what it is now, I guess. No point crying over spilt milk. You say bring back workhouses as in jest in chat, but I think there's a large portion of the population who would absolutely love to see workhouses come back. They can relish the idea of workhouses coming back. You can market it as a federal jobs guarantee, a policy which I'm a fan of. No, yeah, we're a cult for thinking that being sincere and having pure morals in politics is cult behaviour, when really and truly what's not a cult is believing that everything can only get worse forever, and that the only way that you can ever talk about the economy is like a household budget. That's not cult behaviour at all. That's not cult behaviour whatsoever. Not criticising Keir Starmer for all the bad things that he does, all the lies that he tells, all the promises that he breaks, all the pledges he rides back on, all the communities that he on, whether it be poor people, whether it be disabled people, whether it be trans people, whoever it might be. No matter how much bad stuff he does, people who support him regardless and won't hear any criticism, that's not cult behaviour. That's just grown-ups being back in the room, chat. That's what the adults back in the room looks like.
Calculation is obviously that those people will always vote Labour against, possible vote anywhere else. But
well, I think that's, again, a very dangerous assumption. They don't have to vote. They don't have to vote Labour. They can make their own choice. And people are well informed. They can see what's going on. And this very public debate, really, it's very odd when you've got two front benches agreeing to keep a cap on benefits, knowing the terrible effect it has on the poorest children in our society.
So does he agree then with Westminster's leader of the SNP, Stephen Flynn, that they should join the other side of the chamber? We should have a uni bench for the uni party. Couldn't agree more, Jeremy. And Stephen, of course, because he's the one who said it. They will vote Labour and they will like it. True, because Keir Starmer is forcing them to vote Labour because he won't support proportional representation. As are obviously the Conservatives. They are also doing that.
Keir Starmer had thrown him out of Labour, but Tony Blair never did, even though he rebelled against Blair many times. So I wondered if he agreed with actually Tony Blair himself, who more or less said to me earlier, as you noticed, that Starmer is tougher than he was.
I think we have a mood and an atmosphere in the Labour Party at the moment that is truly appalling and dreadful. The way in which many people have been suspended or lost their membership, and the stress and the mental health stress that people who've been 30 and 40 years in the Labour Party, it's been their life, it's been their social milieu, it's been everything, are suddenly told you liked a tweet that somebody sent out 10 years ago from an organisation that we don't like. We are now retrospectively imposing a penalty on you and removing them from party membership.
I mean, just to be clear, Keir Starmer did say that if you'd apologised and, backtracked on...
He's not caught talking about himself. He's talking about plenty of other people who've been forced out of the party for incredibly nebulous reasons. I don't think Jeremy is talking about himself here, Robert. Because, Jeremy, you admit that he was happy to stand by his words, as he well should, because they were correct. But, he wasn't expelled from the party for liking the wrong tweet.
What you said after the Equalities Commission report on anti-Semitism, he would have had you in the party. Do you regret not doing that?
Listen, I made a statement when the EHRC report came out, which I stand by, and I have to say that everything that's happened since then, including the very thorough Ford inquiry into this, and as well as that, the Al Jazeera documentary, shows that everything I said was actually borne out by the facts of the time. Anti-Semitism is a vile, evil thing in our society, just as much as any other form of racism is.
Now, one of the statements that Blair made was that...
What, today?
Today, just now to me in this interview. I mean, he said that the burden of tax in this country is too high and that we're already spending too much on public services.
Well, it's a very odd thing for him to say, but then he is a very wealthy man, so maybe he would be worried about taxes. But let's
Get him, Jez! Get him!
Let's just unpick that for a moment. If he's saying that the level of expenditure is too high on public services, and he doesn't want to say we're going to cut public services, then where does that lead you to, other than contracting out and privatisation, which in the end actually costs more? The Private Finance Initiative, the Building Schools for the Future Initiative, both of which he brought in. But yes, they build hospitals and schools, but we're all paying the price.
But you had a policy...
Yeah, exactly. It could have been public investment. It's worth pointing out as well, right? It's worth reiterating this. I know I say this every time PFIs comes up, but it's so important to understand just how silly it was as a policy. The only reason PFIs were done was to get public funding for public services and public institutions, like hospitals and schools, was to be able to get additional borrowing for them without it looking like the government was borrowing money. Because the government deficit, surplus, whatever it might be, doesn't include private money being given into these institutions, right? They have to pay back this debt that they owe using public money as part of their existing budgets. But the overall money that was injected is kept off the books. It's kept off the government's deficit surplus reporting. So Tony Blair, on multiple occasions, ran a budget surplus in the UK, which is very unheard of in look at the history of this country. And he did it because of PFIs. There was no need to do it. We know how the economy works. We know how the government's economy works. We know the fact that deficits are fine. There's no problem with a government running a deficit, running fiscal expansion. This is how we grow our economy, as per John Maynard Keynes, economic iconoclast he is. But it was done cynically to make the government look like it was doing better than it was, when really and truly they were just loading up huge amounts of debt that then that has to get paid off by future taxpayers, by future governments. It's not like public debt, where we don't really have to pay it back because we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to the Bank of England. This was real debt, real toxic debt that was put into the hands of private shareholders never to see again. It's the worst policy, economic-wise, that any government in this country has ever engaged in, outside of the austerity period that followed it. Unfathomably bad policy.
See, in both 2017 and 2019, to borrow significant sums to invest. I mean, surely you must recognise that with interest rates where they are now, that would be cripplingly expensive for the government.
It would obviously be expensive to borrow. Mind you, at the time we wrote those manifestos, the interest rates were very much lower. COVID hadn't happened. But nevertheless, if you don't borrow to invest, then what do you do other than destroy your public services?
Are you happy to be out of Labour now that they've moved in this direction?
Well,
And it's also worth pointing out as well is that isn't the fact that borrowing is now more expensive for the government, the fact that fiscal expansion is more expensive for the government, that's true. But it's only expensive in comparison to the ridiculously low interest rates and the unheard of low bond yields that we had as a country for the austerity period because of austerity, because of the lack of the continuation of the fiscal expansion of the Brown period post-financial crisis, right? That's the only reason why people think that gilt yields are high, that interest rates are high. These are normal gilt yields. These are normal interest rates. This is the bond yields for the government are basically exactly where they were in the post-war period, where every single year we were borrowing to invest in this country, to build hundreds of thousands of council houses, to build the NHS, to nationalise industries under Clement Attlee, under Conservative prime ministers who succeeded him. Rab Butler spent his entire time engaging in fiscal expansion. He wasn't neoliberal, he wasn't pro-austerity. This was the consensus politics of the time. Both parties were engaging in fiscal expansion for investment, and it led to higher average growth up until 1979 from the post-war period than we got post-Thatcher till now. And they had bond yields, interest rates similar to what we have now. In fact, debt to GDP ratio in the post-war period was way higher than it is now. And yet, even with the public's finances being in a worse state than they were, with some Marshall Plan funding, of course, we built the welfare state and we created the kind of golden age of the economy for this country. The idea that the government has run out of money is just, not only is it like kind of technically untrue, because the government has unlimited money because it's a sovereign currency issuer, but it's also like practically untrue as well, just because you have to compare this historically to how our economies have looked in the recent past, in the modern era, so to speak. We have literal evidence right in front of us showing what can be done with the economy looking like it is with regards to debt to GDP ratio, with regards to bond yields, with regards to interest rates.
Look, I'm very disappointed at the economic direction in which the party has moved. It seems to have given up on equality, given up on public ownership, and given up on the issues of benefits and poverty, such as the two-child policy.
So have you got a team to run a campaign as an independent?
Listen, I'm very busy all the time campaigning and working and so on. But just give you an example.
Yeah.
Public ownership, which has now been apparently dropped by the Labour front bench. Where is the case for not taking water into public ownership? Since privatisation, £72 billion has been taken out of our water industry. And what's happened? Sewage, pollution, waste, leakage and high bills. There is nothing other than a case.
But again, how would you take it into public ownership if you're not going to borrow at cripplingly high rates?
You take it into public ownership by an act of Parliament to buy the industry, an act of Parliament.
And second of all, there's not cripplingly high rates. Clement Attlee was not crippled by the very similar rates to what we have now. Clement Attlee wasn't crippled by the debt to GDP ratio way more than what we have now. Did anyone say, oh, Clement, you can't do this. This is crippling high borrowing costs. He was like, no, this is what's good for the country. Let's do it. Let's invest. And did it create the best period of our country as far as economics is concerned? Yes, it did.
Parliament which would set the share value, and they would be given government bonds in return for the share value.
Now,
but if you don't do it, then what are we going to do? Be in hock to these water companies that are unbelievably inefficient and greedy.
Unfortunately.
And Jeremy is like, that's like the nice way of doing it. The nice way of doing it is exchanging government bonds for the share price. That's the nice way of doing it. I am not nice. I am not nice, Jeremy. I do not want to give these people a single pound of public money, right? Not a single penny of public money will be given to these greedy shareholders, given the dividends that they've paid out, whilst getting these companies into debts so they then collapse like Thames Water. No, mate, not a penny, right? Eminent domain. This is our we built it, we paid for it, it's back in our hands.
I'm told we're almost out of time, so I've got one very quick answer from you, please, which is, are you going to run for London Mayor?
I'll let you know.
No, don't run for London Mayor, Jeremy. Run in your constituency. You're a good MP. You're an amazing MP. The people in your constituency love you. There's no reason for you to give up the connection you have with your community to try this grand project. I don't think it's worth it. Personally, I would rather see him as an MP.
Not a no, is it?
You can't expect me to come on your wonderful programme and make...
An announcer. Yes, we expect you to come on the show and tell the people of the UK.
Was that an invitation to come back?
It's always an invitation to come back. Very good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
So one of the things I talked to both Blair and Corbyn about is quite how determined Keir Starmer is, how tough he is. I mean, do you think actually successive leaders of your party are rather underestimated?
Yes, it's incredible. It's incredible to hear a politician speaking and realise that this person is actually a human and not just a fucking lizard in a human suit. It's incredible that someone actually comes across like a real human being.
Rishi Sunak tried calling him Sir Softy. He's not soft at all. He's one of the most ruthless leaders we've seen.
Well, I think what we've learnt about Keir Starmer is actually you can trust a word that he says, because only just a few years ago he was campaigning and telling everyone in the country that Jeremy Corbyn was the right person to be our Prime Minister. He set out a series of commitments when he was seeking to be leader of the Labour Party, many of which he's ditched. And we now hear that after almost a decade of Labour politicians saying to the Conservative Party that actually the cap on child benefit going to your first two children only is completely wrong and they would reverse it, he's ditched that as well. So is he ruthless, or is he just sort of prepared to say anything, tell you anything to try?
I mean, Keir Starmer is an opportunist. He's an absolute opportunist. He's not really actually that ruthless. The ruthless man is Morgan McSweeney. Morgan McSweeney is the ruthless one. He's the one who's the brains behind the operation to excise left politics from this country forever, right? If you want to talk about someone who's actually ruthless, it's that man, Morgan McSweeney. Keir Starmer's an idiot. He hasn't got a strategy, he hasn't got a plan, right? He lets other people write his plans for him. He spent the entire time flip-flopping. He's a terrible public speaker. He didn't know what he was doing when he ran, and he basically had to get a crash course in economics so that he could even talk about this stuff when it came to giving public interviews, etc., etc. He's an idiot. He's not a strong leader in any sense of the word. But what he is an opportunist. What he is power hungry, and he will do whatever it takes to get that and use the skills of other people who are more ruthless than he is.
Hang on. You're the party who believes that governing is more important than anything else. How can you criticise a Labour leader who says you can't do anything unless you win an election?
Well, I think you have to just look at the commitments he has made, the campaigning he's done for Jeremy Corbyn. He's now telling us he's going to do something completely different. On the basis he seems to have broken every other commitment or promises made to the British people at elections and otherwise. I just don't know how the British people can trust him, and that's why I don't think they will be supporting.
I mean, Liz,
they can't trust him because he lies about everything. But we know, given the kind of direction the party's going and the people that he's gone along with, these are people who will believe the things he's saying now. Clearly, this is the direction, right? The lies were before. This is the real Keir Starmer. Yeah, and he is indeed standing up right now.
Though, a point which is important, which is you cannot take the votes of traditional Labour supporters for granted. I mean, we talked a little bit earlier about...
You obviously can. Have you met these traditional supporters? I've talked to so many of these people, these traditional Labour Party supporters, and they're out there going, well, we've just got to get the Tories out. Starmer's not great, but we've got to make do with what we've got. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, you're digging your own grave, mate. Sorry. And then clearly they can take these voters for granted, because you look at the stats, you look at the polling, traditional Labour voters, I think they've dropped off, like actual activist voters, they've dropped off with regards to polling based upon the election results in 2017 2019 by like 3%. That's nothing, considering to the votes they're gaining from reactionary lunatics in the Red Wall.
About the two-child limit on universal credit. But what is the argument for keeping the water industry, which many people would say has totally failed, in private ownership?
I was canvassing in one of the by-elections yesterday. A man who hadn't voted for us for the last two elections said he was coming back to Labour. I asked him why. He said, all that stuff you promised last time, it just wasn't credible. You're back on the right track.
This person doesn't exist. This is a lie. Liz Kendall is making this person up. I have 0% belief that she is being sincere when she says this.
The public know we have good hearts. They want to know we have wise heads.
I know full well, Liz, that you do not have a good heart. Your heart is black as soot, and I know it. That's something I do know.
And the reason winning is important is we cannot take a single child out of poverty if we're not in government. We can't tackle climate change. We can't put the NHS or social care back on track. Dreams without power, ideals without power is just dreaming. I don't just want to dream,
Liz,
I want to do.
I have got to wind you up.
So that's why you're promising to say you're not going to do the thing that you say you want to do. This makes no fucking sense. That doesn't make any sense at all to say, well, actually, we want to do these things, but if we promise we won't do them, that's the only way we'll get into power. So you're saying you're not going to do them, right? So you're saying that this is the thing that you're not going to do, because you say that if we promise it, you won't get into power. Okay, brilliant, wonderful, great, fantastic. Score 1 for Liz.
But I think you got your point across. Now, that's it. With MPs going on their holidays, we're taking a break till September. I'm off to write books. No rest for the wicked, eh? See you in a few weeks. Goodbye.
Well, you'll see me, because I will still be here, talking shit about politics every day, 5 ever. It will never end. The No Justice stream never ends. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing. It does help out the channel and the algorithm. And if you click the bell notification icon, it will let you know when I go live and when I upload videos. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my handle is @NoJusticeMTG, and that is Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. If you want to support my channel in a more financial manner, you can do so by becoming a member for just 99p, by super chatting, or by supporting me on Patreon, with the link is in the description of this video, and hopefully I'll catch you on the next segment.